Ghostbusters the Video Game for the Nintendo Wii was something of a unique experience when it came out in 2009. Aside from the obvious motion controls, it features significant changes from the other, higher-profile versions of the game released alongside it. If not for some glaring flaws, these changes might just have made it the secret best version of the game. Not just for what it adds to the experience, but ironically, what it removes as well. This is Chris from Makopowered, and welcome to Weekend Rental, where we look at games that, while not widely considered classics, or sometimes even good, are still worth examining and maybe even playing despite themselves. Before we get started, you may be asking, why is this video about a Wii game? I thought this channel only looked at retro games. Well,
guess what, mother.
The Wii was released holiday 2006, 15 years and 3 console generations ago. On top of that, Ghostbusters the Video Game came out in 2009, 12 years ago. So I'm pretty sure that both the game and the system qualify as retro, and that we're all old. Anyway, Ghostbusters the Video Game was developed by Terminal Reality and released in 2009 for the Xbox 360 and PS3. The Wii version, however, was developed by Red Fly Studio. Red Fly looks like it was largely a Wii developer, having worked on games like Mushroom Men: The Spore Wars and the Wii version of Star Wars: The Force Unleashed 2. It doesn't look like they're around anymore because, based on what I could find, their last console release was 2016's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, which... yikes. All of these versions of Ghostbusters were published by... Wait, seriously? We're talking about Atari Infogrames again? Yeah, we are, because Atari Games published all of the different versions of the game. So, there's that. This game, though, was kind of a huge deal during development. Why? Because it wasn't burdened with being a tie-in to a contemporary movie release. It was the movie release. The game was created to not only be a love letter to the Ghostbusters movies, but, in essence, be the third Ghostbusters movie people had been clamoring for years for. The script for the game was written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, who wrote the scripts for the first 2 movies. Aykroyd and Ramis didn't just write the script, though. They had an active hand during development, as well as once again playing Ray Stantz and Egon Spengler, respectively. Speaking of, not only did Aykroyd and Ramis reprise their characters in the game, but almost all of the major cast of the first 2 movies came back for the game, including Bill Murray, who was notoriously gun-shy about being in another Ghostbusters movie, back as Peter Venkman. Annie Potts is back as Janine, William Atherton is, perhaps surprisingly, back as Walter Peck. They even got Max von Sydow to return for a quick guest appearance as Vigo the Carpathian, who is now a fixture of the Ghostbusters firehouse. Oh, and, of course, Ernie Hudson rounds out the main cast as Winston Zeddemore. Well, okay. I say of course, but this is only the 3rd time that Winston has appeared in a Ghostbusters video game across the franchise's 30-plus years, and the other times were all Ghostbusters 2 games. He was in both Activision's Ghostbusters 2 NES game and the far superior Japan and PAL-only Famicom game New Ghostbusters 2. Maybe we can call it 4 games if we count the Game Boy port of New Ghostbusters 2, which did come out in North America as just Ghostbusters 2, but that's it. None of the versions of the David Crane-developed Ghostbusters game from the 80s had Winston. The Genesis game had all of the Busters but Winston, and neither the real Ghostbusters Game Boy or arcade game had Winston, with the arcade game and its ports, again including everyone but Winston, and the Game Boy game choosing to focus solely on Peter Venkman. So, yeah, Winston's kind of gotten the short end of the stick, so it's nice to see him here as he should be, a key member of the team. In addition to the returning cast, the most notable additions are Brian Doyle Murray, Bill Murray's brother, playing New York's mayor, and Alyssa Milano voicing Elissa Selwyn, Peter's new love interest. There are a couple of notable absences in the cast, but that's something we'll circle around to in a bit. The love for the Ghostbusters movies is everywhere in the game, so much so that you're probably going to get sick of me saying some form of "from the original movie." It can be seen from the opening, which starts with the 1984 version of the Columbia Pictures title card and parallels the beginning of the original movie, to the fact that all of the music from the game comes from Elmer Bernstein's score for the first movie, none of which can be played here thanks to YouTube's draconian copyright algorithm. The plot of the game could even be called more Ghostbusters 2 than Ghostbusters 2. What do I mean by that? Well, first, spoiler alert for obvious reasons. While the game takes place in 1992, 3 years after Ghostbusters 2, it actually picks up the plot thread of the first movie. The player, rather than taking the role of one of the main Ghostbusters, is instead thrust into the role of the unnamed rookie, whose main job description is guinea pig for all of the new, potentially dangerous equipment. You get hired by the Ghostbusters just as there's another surge in ghost and paranormal activity in the city, which just happens to coincide with the opening of a certain exhibit at the Natural History Museum, an exhibit on Gozer the Gozerian. Instead of introducing a new, unrelated threat to the city/world/existence, like the aforementioned Vigo the Carpathian in Ghostbusters 2, the game's plot returns to address not just Gozer the Destructor from the first movie, but Ivo Shandor, the cultist and architect who built Dana Barrett's apartment building. You know, the one which acted as Gozer's gateway to 1984 New York? Spook Central.
Your girlfriend lives in the corner penthouse of Spook Central.
Remember, the Ghostbusters didn't destroy Gozer in the first movie. Gozer is a god after all. They just closed the portal Gozer was coming through by crossing the streams. Because of this, that they return to the threat of Gozer and Shandor in the game makes it a nice continuation of the plotline from the first movie, and has the game maintain more of a continuity with it than Ghostbusters 2 did. The game even incorporates the librarian ghost from the opening scene of the first movie, tying her to Shandor and Gozer, actually making her a tragic, sympathetic figure rather than just a one-off jump scare. See, the reason she haunted the library is because Edmund Hoover, one of Shandor's cultist disciples, seduced her in order to gain access to restricted texts in the library. Restricted texts on Gozer. When she figured out what Hoover was doing, she rejected him, which led him to kill her and hide her body in a closed-off section of the library, which she then began to haunt. Focusing on the librarian this way allowed Ramis, Aykroyd, and the game devs to not only add more dimension to the ghost, but more dimension to the original story as well. With her ties to Shandor and his ties to Gozer, it makes sense that she would be the first manifestation of Gozer's imminent arrival at the beginning of the first movie, and it's a nice bit of narrative construction that she plays a prominent role here. One more possibility the game opened up was the opportunity to revisit ideas that wound up on the cutting room floor. First, the notion of the Ghostbusters visiting the Ghost Realm has been kicked around as a concept for a third Ghostbusters movie since the mid-90s. Here, the Busters get to visit it multiple times, the player gets to interact with it, and everyone gets to fight another revisited idea. A combined Shandor-Gozer. Shandozer, if you will. See, one of the discarded concepts for the original movie was that Gozer, rather than being played by Slavica Jovan, would have manifested as Shandor himself, played by Paul Rubens. While Rubens does not voice him in-game, a fusion of Shandor and Gozer appears as the final boss of the game, bearing more than a little resemblance to the former Pee Wee Herman. Once again, the game gave Aykroyd and Ramis a chance to revisit ideas while, at the same time, establishing more of a continuity, without having to worry about practical effects or Hollywood budgets. All of this is all well and good, and shows the absolute love for the franchise that went into creating the game, but all of this appears in all of the versions of the game. So, what makes the Wii version so special? Well, first there's the visuals. Unlike the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions of the game, the Wii version does not try to go for photorealism, instead opting for a more cartoonish, stylized look. This look falls somewhere between the movie aesthetic and the look of the real Ghostbusters cartoon, which, I'm not gonna lie, turned me away from the Wii game for a long time. Here's the thing though, these stylized visuals kind of pull off a Wind Waker here. Because they're not trying for photorealism, they have aged far more gracefully than the other versions of the game. The attempts at photorealism in the other games merrily dance into the uncanny valley and, let's be real, have not aged particularly well. The character models look more like wax figures of the actors, and it's clear that they've been subtly but significantly touched up for the remastered release on PS4 and Xbox One. On the Wii though, because of the stylization, the characters are able to be more expressive and emotive, adding to the humor and line delivery in various scenes. Next, and please try to suppress the groan, there's the motion controls. The control scheme here works along the same lines as games like The Conduit and Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, in that the player moves the rookie with the nunchuck thumbstick and aims by pointing the Wiimote at the screen. Unlike with those other games though, the materiality of the connection between the Wiimote and nunchuck actually makes this control scheme feel more authentic to being a Ghostbuster. In essence, what's going on is the Wiimote becomes the neutrino wand that all of the Busters use, and the cord makes it feel like it is connected to the Proton Pack. Quick aside here, we got tons and tons of crappy snap-on accessories for the Wiimote, but no one thought to make an actual neutrino wand or Proton Pack add-on? Really? Sorry. Anyway, this setup is complemented by the way the nunchuck's motion control is implemented as well. Remember, this isn't a first-person shooter. You're there to trap the ghosts. Because of that, you actually throw out the trap by holding a button to prime the trap and then swinging the nunchuck as though sliding it across the floor. Seriously, no one thought Ghostbusters Wii peripherals were a good idea. Oh, and while yes, there are waggle controls, they're not the hassle one would think and actually make sense contextually. So, you're a Ghostbuster. You are inevitably going to get covered in slime. Rapidly shaking the nunchuck allows you to shake off the slime, cleaning yourself faster. That's it. That's the extent of the waggle controls. You can stop worrying now. The thing is, the Wii controls also kind of improve on the controls for the other versions of the game, with some additions and subtractions. In the 360 and PS3 version, the standard neutrino wand has a base beam used to wear ghosts down, and then a capture beam to hold them and drag them towards the open trap. Now, when a ghost is weakened enough in these versions, the capture beam kicks in automatically. Okay, fine, makes sense. The Wii version, on the other hand, just amalgamates these into a single neutrino stream, which also makes sense. However, there are multiple puzzles where you need to use the capture beam to move objects. In the Wii version, this happens as long as there's slime on the objects, which is kind of logical. The capture beam picks up on the paranormal residue, allowing the object to be moved. Okay, great. In the 360 and PS3 versions, however, the slime isn't necessary, but an extra button to activate the capture beam is. This is weird to me because, as far as I know, and I just watched both movies to be sure, the beam from the neutrino wand is always the capture beam, so I don't understand what the extra step is for. The Wii controls also add something which is sorely missed in the 360 and PS3 versions of the game: a lock-on button. The 360 and PS3 versions of the game play a lot like, let's be honest here, Gears of War. You have to make sure your aim is accurate, you've got the quick reload button in the form of the cooling vent button on the Proton Pack, and the additional weapons feel largely like analogs to things like the shotgun in Gears. Having said that, busting ghosts can take longer because it's significantly more difficult to stay on target. Not with the Wii game though. The lock-on, while not perfect, reduces the time and frustration tied to trapping ghosts. A potentially unintended bonus of this change is that it makes the game's pace much snappier, and it isn't the only control change that does so. Let's look at the Pke Meter, one of the most iconic pieces of Ghostbusters equipment. In the 360 and PS3 versions of the game, the player cannot use the Pke Meter without also wearing the goggles, which automatically switches the game to first-person view. That'd be fine, if not for the fact that it also slows down movement a lot. Combine that with the fact that scanning things with the Pke Meter and goggles is one of the key ways to earn money for weapon upgrades, something else the Wii version does away with as a streamlining measure, and this hugely impacts the overall pace of the game. Using the Pke Meter on the Wii is a different story. Yeah, you can still use the goggles, and have to in order to see certain paranormal residues or objects. You don't automatically put them on when you pull out the Pke Meter though. Instead, the Pke Meter is treated like any other piece of equipment, meaning that the player can have it out while still maintaining full speed and movement. Oh, and you can still scan ghosts like this too, meaning that aspect has been streamlined as well. Finally, let's go back to trapping ghosts one more time. In the 360 and PS3 versions of the game, once the player has a ghost worn down enough to enable the capture beam, they then need to wrangle the ghost around the room, Luigi's Mansion style, in order to build up a slam meter which will wear it out enough to be able to trap it. The thing with doing this is that it makes the trapping process even more lengthy. Luigi's Mansion works because the poltergust vacuum immediately wears down the ghost you're trying to catch as you're wrangling. It's the whole process, not just part of it. The Wii version doesn't completely do away with this notion, but significantly streamlines it too. Yes, the player still has to slam the ghost around after wearing it down before they can trap it, but there's no meter to build up. Instead, there are timed directional cues, and the player has to swing the Wiimote in that direction, giving a more tactile experience to the act of wearing the ghost down. Okay, the word streamlining just got used a lot, and some could argue that streamlining is a nice term for simplifying. That's not a bad thing though. Not everything needs to be complicated, and editing in order to streamline an experience makes the pacing snappier, the plot easier to grasp and follow, and the overall experience more thrilling and fun. The Wii game does this with the overall structure of the game, and the game is better off for it. The 360 and PS3 versions of the game feel like Aykroyd and Ramis were told that they could do everything they wanted to do with the Ghostbusters, and so they did. for better or worse. Why does the Sedgwick Hotel get a fisherman ghost, complete with spectral waves and marine life, other than that it looks cool? Why do the Ghostbusters need to navigate Times Square in order to fight the returned Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, other than they needed to emphasize that they're in New York, TM? The Wii game either removes or combines several aspects of the other games in order to offer a narrative and experience which, quite frankly, just flows better. Instead of trying to catch Slimer in the basement of Ghostbusters HQ before moving to the Sedgwick to catch him properly, essentially giving the player two different tutorials, the Wii game just combines them and has on-the-job training at the Sedgwick, just like the first movie. There is no fisherman ghost at the Sedgwick, instead focusing on the chef ghost in the kitchen, which actually makes more sense for the context. Because there is no slime tether, which, alright, fine, was a neat tool, the Ghost World sequences are significantly faster paced and less annoying. The Wii game shows the benefits of someone saying no to things, a lesson painfully learned during the production of the Star Wars prequels. There is also enough original content here, not shared by the 360 and PS3 versions of the game, to make the Wii version a significantly different experience, while still sharing the overall plot. Not everything is perfect here though. The sound mixing, for example, is, let's be generous and call it, not great in certain spots. There are times where the music can overwhelm the dialogue, and when this happens, the captioning isn't the greatest help either, because it is often not one-to-one with the actual spoken lines for some reason.
How mad would you be at those three little dinky types?
That giant blue and white toy man thing or whatever is still coming. It's climbing the building.
Heads up.
Because of this, Peter definitely comes off as even creepier than usual with disconcertingly breathy delivery that isn't there in the 360 or PS3 versions of the game.
Hey, listen. You guys go with Winston and the recruit. I'll be your personal protection.
On that note, let's go back to the voice actors. As mentioned earlier, there are two notable absences from the returning cast: Rick Moranis as Louis Tully, and Sigourney Weaver as Dana Barrett. Now, I get why Rick Moranis didn't want to return. He had largely stepped back from acting after the death of his wife, so that he could spend more time as a parent, which I can respect. It would have been nice to see his character, but he's still referenced as being the Ghostbusters accountant at the end of the game.
Lewis has been scouting locations and...
Weaver's absence is a bit more complicated though. Dana Barrett was originally planned to have been in the game, but when Weaver was asked to participate early in the game's development, she refused, concerned over the game's quality. After learning that Bill Murray had signed on, and knowing how reluctant he was to come back to anything Ghostbusters, Weaver tried to join the cast. At that point though, the game was already too far into production, so she missed her chance. Dana is still referenced, but only in regard to the events of the first movie. Weaver's absence makes Peter's character seem like even more of a creep. Let's be clear at this point, Peter Venkman is a creep, and the films and the game for that matter are fully aware of it. It's kind of understandable that Bill Murray didn't want to play the character for a third movie. His introductory scene in the first movie is him using his position of authority to attempt to lure an undergrad into a date. There's a reason this is spray painted on the door to his lab. His entire relationship with Dana in the first movie was predicated on the super creepy notion of no means try harder. It's actually kind of surprising that he turns down the gatekeeper's advances just based on all of his prior behavior. In the second movie though, he actually seems to have matured. Well, yeah, he makes jokes, he accepts Dana's son and clearly has affection for and bonds with him. By the end of Ghostbusters 2, it seemed like he'd mended his relationship with Dana because he'd matured and that he, Dana, and Oscar would wind up moving forward together. The films know he's a creep and try to show how Peter needs to mature in order to maintain a functional relationship. Weaver's absence erases that through line though, and Peter is worse than ever. Not only does his introduction with Alyssa Selwyn start with him hitting on her and then stating that rejection doesn't work on him, but there are also moments like this one in the Sedgwick where Peter tries to avoid danger by escorting ladies to their rooms. Combine that with the weirdly breathy delivery for the Wii version of the recorded lines.
Your cadet had to straighten him out. Ray, we need to have a heart-to-blob talk with this one, or we are going to have discipline issues when he's a teenager.
And Venkman is uncomfortable to be around. And yet... So, one of the major differences the Wii version offers over the 360 and PS3 version is that the player gets to choose the gender of the rookie. This is really cool. Or at least it should be. There's a small problem though. I decided to play through some of the game as the female rookie to see if any of the lines change, and... nope. Everyone refers to the rookie as he, and Peter, despite hitting on seemingly every other woman present in the game, well, the living ones, that is, treats the rookie as one of the guys. On the one hand, it's kind of nice that Peter isn't perving on his subordinate. On the other, it's pretty clear that the male rookie was the default, and there was no expectation that players would choose the female rookie. One last thing, the Wii version is the only version to offer couch co-op. The PS3 and 360 games only offer online co-op, and even then, that's for special missions, not the main game itself. The Wii version allows two players to play through the entire campaign cooperatively, something I once again couldn't test because of the pandemic. Ghostbusters for the Wii offers a tighter, more streamlined experience compared to the other versions of the game. On top of that, the motion controls just make busting feel good. The game is held back from being the secret best edition of the title by the weird audio mixing, poor subtitles, and a seeming unwillingness to fully commit to the gender options for the rookie. This is the closest we're going to get to a proper third movie with all four Ghostbusters though, and there is definitely enough worthwhile here to make it a good weekend rental.
Yes?
The new patient is here. They're early.
That's fine. We can start now.